Hey, everybody, can y'all hear my sound okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
It's now 3:03, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. Stephanie, would you mind doing the roll call?
Yes. Ms. Bayham?
Here.
Mr. Ennis? Ms. Gonzalez?
Here.
Ms. Jordan?
Here.
Mr. Bianca? Tony, you're muted. Can you unmute for a minute? Mr. Bianca? Oh, you're still muted. I need you to unmute and say here, please. Making sure our audio is right.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Taylor?
Here.
Ms. Webb?
Here.
Dr. Wilson? And Ms. Washington?
Here.
1, 2, 4 trucks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You have 7. You have 1.
Thank you, Stephanie. Before we get started, I just want to remind you all of the rules for committee members and members of the public attended in person. Please raise your hand to speak and wait to be recognized by the chair before speaking. To help the meeting run smoothly, please keep side conversations to a minimum and comments related to the topic we are discussing. For those committee members who are attending virtually, remember you must be on camera and have your first and last name showing to be counted toward our quorum. Please keep microphones muted unless called upon by the chair. Electronically raise your hand to request to speak and wait to be called on by the chair. For attendees, electronically raise your hand to request to speak. Once recognized by the chair, your microphone will be turned on. After speaking, the microphone will be returned to mute. Also, the Q&A is to only be used by those needing ADA accommodation to participate in the meeting. Public comment will not be accepted via the Q&A and except for those individuals who requested the accommodation. As for order, committee members in person and virtually will be allowed to speak first. Public members in person will then be called on, followed by public participating virtually who have their hands raised. As with all hybrid meetings, it can be difficult to keep track of all those wanting to speak in person and virtually. Please be patient. All comments and questions from committee members and the public may be limited should we run into time constraints. So please keep that in mind. Also, comments about a person's character would not be allowed. Finally, members of the public will have the opportunity to provide public comment before each vote and during designated public comment periods. Public members will be given 1 opportunity to speak for each agenda item and will be limited to 2 minutes. The chair may also use their discretion to determine if comments will be accepted outside of those times. Everyone should have reviewed the July meeting summary, which is linked in the agenda you received via email. There's also a copy in your committee packet. I need a motion to accept the minutes.
I will.
Motion by Tony.
Yes. Thank you.
And we need
We need a second.
Vivian.
Due to the new regulations on open meeting laws, we will need to do a roll call vote. Stephanie, can you please take the roll call vote?
Yes. A answer yay is that we are adopting or approving the July meeting summary. Nay is that you do not approve the summary or you can abstain. Ms. Bayham? Yay. Ms. Bayham, yay. Mr. Ennis? Ms. Gonzalez? Yay. Ms. Gonzalez, yay. Ms. Jordan?
Yay.
Ms. Jordan, yay. Mr. Piantek?
Yes. Yay.
Mr. Piantek, yes. Mr. Taylor?
Yay.
Mr. Taylor, yes. Ms. Webb?
Yay.
Ms. Webb, yay. Dr. Wilson? And Ms. Washington.
Yay.
We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 yeas, no nays.
All right, the July meeting summary is passed by unanimous consent. First on the agenda is an update on LRS. We will now have Melissa Baham from Louisiana Rehabilitation Services get us started.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I want to start by thanking the Dean Council. They gave me the opportunity a couple of weeks ago, several weeks ago, to present at their legislative committee. And I provided some information, and I don't have it with me today, but I'll kind of just kind of go over some of the highlights, because what I spoke about is something that has it's my life right now. It's my primary focus is, which is leveraging additional federal funds. So I've spoken in the past about vocational rehabilitation and just the fact that we leave almost 50% of our federal funds on the table each year because we don't have state funds to match our federal funding. So I wanted just to start by just reminding everyone that at LRS, we are doing the best that we can with the funding that we have. But we are underfunded up to this year. We left $29 million on the table. So that kind of gives you, it just kind of gives you an idea of, the federal government allots a certain amount of money to each state depending on their population and other factors. And so what they think a vocational rehabilitation program needs in Louisiana, we do not have at this point. So we are not, we will not stop trying. We will not stop trying to leverage additional federal funds, and we will continue to try to provide services, but we're going to continue to try to come up with different efficiencies and things like that in order to provide the best services that we possibly can with the resources that we have. We're, in addition to being underfunded, we are also understaffed. So we continue just to try to figure out better ways to do things so that we can continue to provide the best services that we possibly can. I want to give an update on pre-employment transition services. I think most people are familiar with that, but that's basically our services that we provide to students with disabilities, usually in high school, but it can be provided up through the age of 21. But one way that we leverage federal funding and provide these services are through what we call third-party cooperative arrangements. And that's something that we've really been part of our focus on when we're trying to leverage these funds. Because in these third-party cooperative arrangements, if we can get school districts on board, the school districts actually put up the state match in either the MFP funding or any type of local funding. It just can't be federal funding, but they put up the state match for a transition specialist for their school district. In some of the larger school districts, they even have multiple staff on these contracts. So it's a win-win because we are able to leverage additional federal dollars. And these school districts have a staff person, a transition specialist on their staff to provide these pre-employment transition services directly to the students in their school districts. So I'm happy to report we're up to 19 active third-party cooperative arrangements. So we have 19 school districts that have done this, that have contracted with us. And we have 2 school districts who we are anticipating contracts for August of 2025, and that's Lincoln and Lafayette parishes. We also have been in discussion with Bienville, St. Charles, Morris Jeff Schools in New Orleans, and Algiers Charter. So we continue, as people are interested, I have a staff person, Sigmund Morel, who goes out and gives them all the details of what a third-party cooperative arrangement looks like to try to enter into more of these contracts to provide these very vital services for students with disabilities. And like I said, also helping to plug that hole that we have in our funding. But this quarter, we have been conducting what we are calling the VR journey. So we have had a lot of turnover in VR, which I've discussed many times. And so we have a lot of new staff. We also had just a lot of new procedures just based on different things that have happened with monitoring reports and things of that nature. And one thing that's very important to me is that we provide consistent services statewide within LRS, and that can be very difficult when you have so many staff. So we're using this as kind of a reset for staff who've been here for a while, and then also just a very in-depth training for new staff to get everybody on board in the whole process. So it goes from referral to closure. We're talking, it's a week training that our rehabilitation counselors and our district supervisors are participating in. So that's ongoing. We have different sessions. It's a week, but there's 4 or 5 different sessions so that we can touch all of our staff statewide. And my last comment, and I should have said this before, just for pre-employment transition services, again, in talking of consistency, we are having our pre-employment transition services vendors reapply. The applications should be going out soon, just so that we can make sure that we have our vendors have the best qualifications and they have good curriculums for our students, so that we're providing good, great services to our students with disabilities. So those are all the updates that I have prepared, but I'm willing to discuss anything or answer any questions.
If somebody wanted to be a vendor, how would they go about applying?
For pre-employment transition services, I can give you the contact information, but Nicole Miller is the pre-employment transition services program manager, and we can get them an application.
All right, thank you for those updates, Melissa. Any questions for Melissa before we move on?
Meredith has her hand raised.
Meredith, you're recognized by the chair.
Hey, thank you. I just wanted to tell Melissa, thank you. Melissa has joined us at the department for several planning meetings, as well as, I know I've told y'all before, she joined us with all of our special education directors. And I think it's so important for her and I to have the same messaging and these similar supports happening in our school systems. This is a key part. What she talked about with the third-party cooperative agreements is a key part to our transition framework in our state. And so that's really important for me. And I just want to tell Melissa, thank you for joining us on this work. And to me, increasing the number of third-party cooperative agreements, like Melissa said, is huge success in our state. And I know we're going to keep working at it and getting those numbers increased. And the more she and I are sharing these resources and telling and answering that question that you just asked about how do they apply, how does this happen? Because we know that getting a transition point person and champion in our school systems helps increase the effectiveness of transition planning for our kids in school. So I just want to tell you, thank you, Melissa, and kudos for all of the efforts that you're putting into this work.
Thank you, Meredith. I appreciate it.
Any other questions for Melissa? All right, if there's no other questions. Next on the agenda is an update from the Louisiana Department of Education. We will now have Meredith Jordan from LDOE give her update.
Thank you so much. Well, good afternoon. First of all, I apologize for joining virtually, but we have a very, very important regional tour occurring across our state this week. And so I'm joining you guys from Shreveport. Yesterday was in Monroe. And I believe I mentioned this particular tour to all of you before. But the purpose of this collaboration and regional travel this fall is really to focus in on addressing our statewide teaching and learning strategy, including designing instructional program coherence for students, and very specifically and connected is ensuring our students with disabilities across our state have access to high quality teaching and learning and to the gen ed curriculum that we know is required by IDEA. And so I'm really excited about this, even though I'm missing being in person with you all. Myself, our assistant superintendent of academics and our literacy director, we are all leading this instructional coherence pathway together all week this week, although tomorrow I'm joining you all in person. And then we'll be in New Orleans Friday, and next week we'll be in Baton Rouge again. Again, I hate being virtual, but this was a really important event for me and for the work that we do for our students with disabilities. So I have a couple of updates for you all that I want to go through. Some final legislation that we've addressed from the 2024 session that we put in at the last BESI meeting, and we worked with our stakeholders on, which is some dyslexia core assessment reimbursements for parents. I'm going to dive into that. Second, I want to talk a little bit more about some other key items and some guidance documents that we are working on, that we brought to SEEP, that we're going to release pretty soon. And then I want to end our conversation talking a little bit about our alternate assessment criteria updates. So those are our students who had the most significant cognitive disabilities and participate in our alternate statewide assessment, which we call LEAP Connect, and some changes that we have worked alongside SEEP and our stakeholders with, that you all will see go to BESI in December. So let's start with a conversation about dyslexia core assessments and a parent reimbursement opportunity that's coming up. And it will take us some time to roll out. This was a final piece of legislation that we needed to address from last year's legislative session that requires the department to reimburse parents either through a vendor, an approved vendor, or we can reimburse the LEA for this parent requested additional dyslexia testing once a child receives an at-risk result from our statewide dyslexia screener. So we codified this into policy at our most recent BESI meeting, and the reimbursement that BESI approved is going to be $500 per parent request per academic year. So you can make one request in that academic year that follows that at-risk screener. And the parent will either select the school system to complete the dyslexia assessment, because we know all of our school systems have qualified professionals to give those assessments, or they can seek out a private vendor. And the vendor, we will have to release a vendor process, and the vendor will receive that reimbursement. So the policy, like I said, is one step. And so we've got that step completed. It will be on notice of intent for a little bit, so it won't be updated in policy for a couple of months. And now our team is working with our finance team on setting up what does that request for applications look like to create an approved vendor list, and then an application process for vendors in order for us to have that reimbursement process set up. And this initiative is funded through a legislatively created dyslexia fund. So this is not using our IDEA state funds. This is using some very specific legislatively created funds to create this process. But I wanted to share this with you all and start to think about, and if you all have feedback for me on what would be helpful and make this easy for parents, because we certainly want that. And I know that this council is created of those stakeholders. And so we can talk about that when I finish. But it'll take us, a bit of time, probably through the winter and into the spring, to actually have that RFA where we're creating a list of vendors, if a parent so chooses to use an outside vendor outside of the school. But wanted to tell you all about that. And I think I mentioned to you all, we've seen quite a bit of dyslexia legislation in our state. And it does require some intense thought and work on our team to get these types of initiatives and processes going. But we've taken some of the first steps on that one. We're working on some further guidance documents as a result of legislation, and resulting in state policy recently. All other sped legislative items, we have already, codified that into policy, talked through all of that with SEEP. But you all know, to implement those things also takes further support, and development of further guidance documents. So for example, we know we codified into policy all of the new requirements around the local SEEK reports, and what has to be on those now. There are 3 requirements that LEAs have to report on. Their IDEA finance information, academic performance data for students with disabilities, as well as any IDEA specific compliance issues that we have cited school systems for in that year. And we have already created and updated our template, that the original template actually came from a lot of feedback for folks on this council as well as on our SEEP panel. And so I had to update that template to include all of those new requirements. And we've sent that to SPED directors. I know it's early. We don't collect those reports until May each year. But it's important for me to start communicating any changes and what's coming ahead of time. So our special education directors can get in front of it, and make sure that they're ready to submit a report that meets those requirements, those new requirements. So that's one example. We also brought updates to our parent handbook, our procedural safeguards handbook that's given to every parent at every annual IEP meeting at least once a year. There are other times that you're required to give that procedural safeguard notice out, but every family receives it at least once a year. And we had some updates that needed to happen in that document that were also a result of both law and policy around some very specific timelines for parents, response timelines for LEAs. And so we are solidifying and completing that parent guidebook update. And that will be ready for release once the most recent set of policies also come out of notice of intent. We need to have that parent handbook ready for those spring IEP meetings and moving forward. So we'll be seeing that SEEP endorse those changes at our last meeting. And we're kind of finalizing and working on branding and making sure the document is pretty and reader friendly for parents. So you all will see that document coming out soon. We're also adding additional family partnerships and support that'll come out in that parent handbook and contact information. Very specifically, our new partnership with the ARC to offer some additional parent support and some statewide parent support that will take the form of some statewide workshops responsive to parent needs that we see across the state. And we're also, I know many of you have heard or talked about the Families Helping Families Southeast location, and we're going to offer some additional support in that region to make sure that those families have some consistency and support. So you'll see some additional partnerships and contact information for parents as well in our new handbook. And we moved in our handbook all of our Families Helping Families contact information as well to the front. That was some feedback that we heard, was to put some of our family support contacts at the beginning of that document. So families know immediately, you know, who can I reach out to for assistance. And then lastly, I want to share a really specific update on one other specific item that we have also discussed at SEEP and resulted in endorsement, and we'll see some changes that are going to go to upcoming BESI in December. So I've talked with you all a lot about and again, this is about our LEAP Connect, our alternate assessment participation criteria. Our participation rate for alternate assessment is at 1.7%. And our latest data is from 2023. So we're getting our participation rate and our percentage right now to include in our next waiver. And you all know that's above the federally set cap, which is 1%. So we have to address this. I've been working with OSIP about this. One of the ways that we have to address this is to look at the eligibility criteria we currently have set in 1530. And we brought, after 2 meetings, we've discussed this with SEEP. We endorsed changes to that policy at the last meeting that will go to Bessie. And so we're going to, and we looked together at, our review included looking at other states that were closer to 1%. What had they done? What were some changes that other states made to their eligibility criteria? And so, once we studied that, we looked at other states who had significantly reduced their rate closer to that federal requirement. We settled with SEEP and they endorsed on recommending to update our criteria, removing adaptive behavior as an indicator for participation, and moved our standard deviation requirement. So we had some pretty lenient, pretty low requirements around standard deviations, whereas other states were really around a 2.5 to 3 standard deviation below the mean to qualify. And that is what SEEP chose to do. We brought several options, and that is what SEEP endorsed. And so we are going to protect our current high school students. So students who are in high school and are already participating in an alternate assessment, right? They're really close to graduation. They have a graduation pathway. Those kids will remain on that alternate assessment throughout their high school career, get their alternate diploma. Those kids will get an alternate diploma. And so we wanted to make sure that those students were still successful and were able to meet high school graduation requirements and alternate diploma requirements. So I wanted to kind of talk to you all about that because we will see a shift in that eligibility criteria once we get approval from Bessie as well. And so just making sure that all of our kids have access to high quality teaching and learning, and only the students who seriously have those significant cognitive disabilities are taking an alternate assessment. And that is what OSIP has directed us and other states who are in similar situations and are over the 1% cap to do and to take action on. And so we're working very closely with them on that. Again, we have a lot going on. We have our next SEEP meeting coming up on November the 12th. And we're going to continue to work with our stakeholders, make policy adjustments where needed, have that responsive guidance documents and responsive to our stakeholders in terms of what will be most helpful to you all and to our students to ensure their success. So I'll end there because I feel like I did go over a lot and entertain any questions or discussion about anything that I talked about.
Thank you, Meredith. Any questions before we move on for Meredith?
I had a quick question. You might have said this, Meredith, and I just don't remember. For the Leap Connect, the eligibility criteria that y'all talked about in 1530, that's going to Bessie. When is that going to Bessie? Did you say December? Is that right?
Yes, it'll
Okay.
be for December, but the changes won't take place until next school year, right? And then you've got a group of students that no change will happen, right? We have high school students who will remain on whichever assessment they're on the alternate assessment if they've previously been eligible on that. It's a very specific, the C criteria, that one that's adaptive and allows you to be at a 2 to 2.3 standard deviation, which is a very low bar. I believe those kids can perform. And some of those kids, we have the April Dunn opportunity, which I know Mr. Ennis and his staff have committed to us and are working with us on making sure that we continue to get that opportunity out there. And the April Dunn opportunity will allow students who can't pass state assessments to get a regular diploma. And so I think supporting with that information too, Stephanie, and continuing to make sure that people know and our high schools and our counselors know that we have to make the best decisions, and our IEP teams, that we have to make the best decisions for these students that set them up for success, right? And allow them to go to a technical college, or enter the workforce, or go to a four-year college. Some of them will. So we have to sort of, add in the other supports and opportunities to help support these kids to get that high school diploma and meet the requirements they need to.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I got a question.
Hey Meredith, you had mentioned, and you may have said it and I missed it, so I apologize, but, for Families Helping Families, NOLA, are y'all still trying to contract with them, or have you partnered with someone else? What's the status there?
We've reached out. It's my understanding that the folks that we have listed and are no longer there, and that they are not in operation. So we are going to support that region with another partner, with the ARC. We've worked with them, and we're going to be listing their contact information to help add in and support in that region as well, because I know our GNO location is doing great work, and I know they are also maxed out even just in the Jefferson region too. So we really felt it important to make sure that we were adding some additional support there.
Question, Meredith. With April Dunn, it begins in ninth grade?
For
Correct?
graduation, yes,
Okay.
but I can enter ninth grade eligible. So if I have failed my state assessments 2 in one subject for 2 years prior to ninth grade, I can qualify in ninth grade for April Dunn and set that criteria for me to meet an alternate, a different criteria for graduation around assessment and get a regular diploma. So I can come into ninth grade. In fact, that is one of the critical moments that we tell IEP teams, you need to check for your ninth graders coming into high school who have IEPs. What does their state test history look like? How did they perform in 7th and 8th grade? And I will know, can I go ahead and apply April Dunn right then and there, and I don't wait? Yeah.
We were just wondering, for middle school, because it's like that buffer in between, like no man's land, I call it. It's, we have some who are in self-contained, and they're only like 1.7, 1.5 deviations, but they're in self-contained class, but they're having to take regular LEAP.
Yes.
So I'm like, we use the connectors, but they're having to take regular LEAP.
And those are the students that I would say, Christy, if they are really struggling on state assessment to get approaching basic. Remember, for the state, we set a really high bar, right? At mastery, that's proficient. But for kids, it's an approaching basic requirement for graduation. Now, and so if they are struggling to meet that, and those kids, I really struggle with that, Christy. And I know we've had some real honest conversations about that, because, what does high quality, are they having access to the curriculum? Sometimes not in those self-contained settings. And so how are we setting them up for success to take LEAP, right? So we tell IEP teams, try as much as you can to get those kids access to high quality instruction. But I know, right, those are IEP team decisions, and nothing, there's not a one size fits all.
No.
But those would be kids that, and I think that's why you're asking, those are perfect opportunities where we need to set those kids up for success using April Dunn.
Okay, and that's why I was wondering, when would it start? Because they're not able to go into regular class, but they're able to perform in a classroom just on the regular LEAP Connect. They're not.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yep. So
And that's what
those
I was-
students could go into ninth grade, and if they haven't met requirements, if they haven't met approaching basic in 7th and 8th grade, they're going to qualify for April Dunn going into ninth grade.
Okay.
And I tell people, even if students have to go into ninth grade, and that's when they start to struggle on LEAP assessments. There's still time. We still have time
Okay.
to get those kids eligible even, during their ninth grade year and in their 10th grade year, and get them to graduation. And that's something that we are still, and you all know when April Dunn went into law, it's been there for a long time, but it is something on my team. I have a person, and we support it all the time, because you have people coming in, you have attrition in school systems, and we have to keep that at the top of their mind, that this is an opportunity to help these students.
That's
And
what
I
was just
appreciate
wondering.
Mr. Ennis for committing and helping us to just keep that word going.
Okay, thank you so much. It helps a lot because we didn't know what to do.
Absolutely.
So, all right, thanks.
Okay, any other questions? Julie, got your hand raised? Oh. All right, if there's no further questions, we will move on to our contractual activities. Stephanie, will you update us on building capacity in education and employment?
Yes, sorry. So this is, if you look in your packet, and it's also linked in your agenda, I stole Keisha's template and and I made this because I liked it so much. So these are the trainings that the ARC offered statewide. This is kind of just a breakdown of who attended. They had 138 total attended. So this is the final numbers. I did get all of this information, all of their demographic before I made this. I made it sometime last week. The thing to note is, that we did have a couple of self-advocates, but as you can see, it was a lot of professionals, mostly professionals. That last training on September 26th, that incentives and benefits, that was strictly for professionals. So on how incentives and benefits for employing people with disabilities, more on the business side, not so much on a consumer side. But that is the information on all of their trainings. There's additional information in the status report, but I kind of liked how and Kelly has her hand raised, sorry. Kelly can talk more on that.
Kelly, you're recognized by the chair.
Hey, I just wanted to make one note that the numbers look bad because not everybody turns in valuations, unfortunately. And most people leave without turning the evaluations in, but we actually had a lot more people register and come to these trainings, especially the business one. We had a lot of people in that one, but again, the evaluations, people just don't complete them. So anyways, I just didn't want you to think that that was it. We really did have some interest in it, especially the businesses. They were really interested in it, but, anyway, that's all.
Thank you.
That's it. Yeah, that's all I have. There is some more information in the status report, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about it.
Thank you, Stephanie. Any questions for Stephanie before we move on?
Oh, sorry. Is there any way to, maybe have the meetings like available for those who couldn't attend for the professional one?
So Kelly does have the information. She did tell me in her report that they would have that, like the slideshows and that kind of thing available for us to post if we wanted to.
I said we could possibly share with different parishes at their chamber meetings, or just a thought.
Kelly?
Yeah,
Oh.
so So, I think I sent all of the slide decks to you guys. We're gonna put it on our website. I was just waiting from our tech guys on vacation. So I wasn't able to get him to put it on on our website. But you guys are welcome to have anything. And if there's something that I miss in one of the trainings, let me know. The training for the businesses, of course, is different than the one for the family. So make sure that you have both of those. And if you need anything, just let me know.
Okay, thank you. All right, hearing no additional questions, we will move on to announcements. There are quite a few important announcements. Please come prepared to the January meeting with recommendations of concepts for the 5-year plan. Please also come prepared to the January meeting with recommendations for the 2026 federal fiscal year plan activities. Lastly, tomorrow is the full council meeting, which will begin at 8:30 a.m. Does anyone on the committee have any announcements to make?
I just want to reiterate what Renata said. This is very, very important, y'all. We I don't remember what meeting, maybe April. All the meetings kind of run together in my brain. But y'all approved the timeline for our 5-year plan. And on that timeline, it is that y'all are recommending concepts for consideration. So things that y'all need to think about between now and January they're kind of broad ideas. So things in education and employment, definitely, because that's what we're looking at. That's what the committee is about. So if there is something that we want to look at, for example, cameras in the classroom, I'm just throwing something out there. That is a big concept that we can look at. And then we would talk about what would be strategies to get there, what activities would we need to do to get it, those kinds of things. So that's what I'm talking about when we're talking about big ideas. What big ideas are we looking for? Then additionally, in January, we're looking for recommendations for activities for the 2026. Always throws me off because
Yeah.
we're in the middle of the year. For the 2026 activities. So just like we came up with the ideas, like the transition to adulthood idea that the council adopted, they're looking for ideas like that. So any activity ideas. But they're very important, y'all. Please, please, please think about them, because that's the only way we can get things done, is if we have an idea of what y'all want to do.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. Any other announcements to make? All right, hearing none, if there are no objections, we can adjourn by unanimous consent. Any objections?
And then she's making a joke,
Oh,
untimely joke.
all right, I hereby adjourn the meeting at 3:46.